Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine. I hope you're doing well. So I have been on one heck of a dig this entire week. People have been telling me to dig into, after we were researching some end time prophecies or whatever. They said, well, you should really dig into Daniel. You should dig. And I was like, the Book of Daniel has things on the end times or whatever. And that led me to find out where the Roman eagle came from, which apparently nobody seems to know. At least online, I haven't found it anywhere, anyone even remotely knowing where the Roman eagle actually came from. And it actually leads into some pretty scary things. And it's really interesting because I'm learning that there really is this like parallel thing going on. It feels like there's just this big war, it seems to be like, between two battling, like there seems to be this long line of bodies of text that are written in similar ways. There are these texts that are written like there's the Bible, all these books of the Bibles that are written in chapter and verses. And then there's these books of the Roman Empire that are written in chapter and verses. They're written the same way. So if you look up like the book of Livy, like chapter 1, or Julius Caesar, they're written the same exact way as the books of the Bible are. They're in chapters and verses, and so they have like 3.1, like book of Livy 1.28. And then you look it up and then it'll have like all, that will refer to a certain verse in there. And so same thing, like if you look up Deuteronomy, 28.1, I don't know, I don't know any, but I'm learning that there are these two texts, but what I'm noticing is no one does both of them. No one studies across both, at least that I can tell, because when I start studying across both, then I start finding all this really cool thing, because that's what I've done. That's the only reason I ever started digging into the Bible. I think you guys know, you've been with me, is for some historical thing or some movie or something like that. And we found some historical stuff in the Bible as some history records or whatever. And we found that kept finding history records in the Bible that kept ringing true, that helped us uncover stuff in history and help us come history on the web and everything. Well, as I do that, and this is exactly what happened today, as I was digging into Daniel, I ended up uncovering a bunch of stuff in Roman history that they are really trying to bury, including the Roman eagle and a prophet in Roman times, a big, huge prophet. So it turns out that there are prophets in the Roman Empire as well, huge prophets that they still is a huge part of like the United Nations today, and is a huge part of their entire global system today. When you hear globalists and everything, and the things that they do and all their festivities, and you see it on the walls in the cities and towns that you go into, and you see the paintings on their walls, and the ivy and everything that they celebrate. They have their own prophets, and that's what they're celebrating, and I'm learning that through their symbology. But I only found it because I was digging into the book of Daniel, so it's really neat to see how one helps you discover the other. And so I'm going to walk you through my dig today on how I found the Roman eagle and the history of the Roman eagle, and why it's so important to the Prussian Empire, the German Empire, the Nazi way, because I was studying, it brought me into studying ancient Rome, and it turns out ancient Rome, before Rome ever even left Italy, they had the eagle with the circle of ivy. And I was just like, that early? They were having ancient Rome had the eagle with the thing, but they don't tell you that. They say they only had it as early as 100 BC. And I'm like, nope, they had it way, way earlier than that. And so I'm going to go into that today about how I found that out. And it's very, very interesting. And all begins with prophets, which I'm so excited because that's what I started writing my fiction series on, is prophets. And it's very, very exciting. So I'm like, I guess I picked a good topic to do, is prophets. I'm very glad that I did that, because it turns out both of these things have prophets, and seems to be important to both sides of things. And it seems to be like there's this war going on in society, and it seems to be that from the things that we see at the UN, and when we watch things like the United Nations and the speakers going on there, they very much believe in this stuff. And I'm starting to really get the feeling when we see things like the CCP is making war on religion and making war on all religions, And when we see the United Nations going after Christianity and Christians and Judaism, it does seem to be like there is a war because of the prophets on this side of things, on the Bible side of things, because their prophets can do signs and wonders, but they think that this side can do signs and wonders. And I think that's a very, very interesting thing. It's very important for us to know that. We think that it's all this fiction stuff they make it, except that we're finding all the real history in there. And I'm like, well, how are we supposed to jibe that if all the real history is in here? We're finding all the real dirt in here, the real truth, and the real things that are unlocking our actual, So anyway, I'll get going on it. So they told me to look up. I'll just get started and I'll walk you through what I found. So what they did is they said, look up. We've been doing Revelations, not a whole lot, but just digging into some Revelations over the last few months. I know my memory isn't so great, so I keep saying, last few months, and then it turns out it's been like a year. So I don't know how long, but we've been digging into Revelations here and there, and noticing how the kings and queens of Europe, like when it says diadems, diadems actually means crowns. And so it talks about, at the end there will be like these crowns, and then everyone will follow them, and these crowns will stand in and say that they're the Lord. And it's kind of like they're representative on earth. They'll say that they stand in as Christ's representative on earth. And I'm like, that's every one of these crowns in Europe. That's every one of their orbs, their sovereign orbs. It has a cross, and they're saying they are Christ's representative on earth. That's literally what they're saying. So it's very, very fascinating to see how Revelations actually does, though we're also learning a lot of the prophecies in the Bible came true already a lot, like thousands of years ago. Prophecies from thousands of years before that actually did become truth. So that's been very fascinating to learn as well. So anyway, so I was like, all right, fine. Since we've been delving into Revelations, sure. Like if there's another prophecy thing, why are we always taught about Revelations? I didn't like the fact that it's been censored to us that there's another big time end times thing that isn't used in Hollywood. I'm like, well, if there's another big time end time prophecy thing, we're always hearing about Revelations in Hollywood. We hear about Revelations all the time in Hollywood movies. Why aren't they telling us about Daniel? I kind of didn't like that. And for that reason alone, I was like, I kind of want to dig into it. But I did something wrong. And I realized that this morning as I was getting ready to do this tape with you. I did something wrong. I dug into it by looking up YouTube videos on it. I don't know why I did that. Because do you remember this whole time as we've been doing things, I've been saying, oh my gosh, as we look and read what the Bible says, I'm like, it's nothing what we've been told what it says. I was raised Catholic, and I'm like, this isn't what I was told it says. Jesus doesn't say stuff that I was told Jesus says. This doesn't say that this is it. This is different. This is different. This is different. Like all the church and stuff, miracles. There's no cross in the Bible. They don't talk about the cross when Christianity goes out and spreads. There's nothing about the cross. The Romans are the ones who do the cross. The Romans that's been the biggest thing. Like they talk about his suffering for a time, but when they go out and they spread the Christian church, they talk about all the prophecies that were fulfilled. They talk about the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible that's been around for 10,000 years or whatever. And they talk about all the prophecies that were like, this is going to happen, 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 this is going to happen. And then they're like, and this is how this guy Jesus fulfilled each one of those prophecies. And that's been very, very interesting. Like we've learned this from this guy, Chuck Missler. He's like, those are the things that bring people, he thinks converts people more than anything else is hearing that prayer. And I was like, I could have told you that. Like, I'm like, that's how this church boomed well, no, but that was through miracles or whatever. But I'm like, that's how the church began, is like the very first Pentecost happens by the disciples that were around this guy stood up, and they start by going, all these prophecies were fulfilled. They don't talk at all about the cross. And you see all these Christians wearing crosses, and it kind of seems foreign to me now because it doesn't reflect at all what we're seeing in the text. And I'm just like, wow, the Roman Empire, this Roman Empire really won in the battle between these two. This Roman Empire really won, because they're all wearing the symbol of this Roman Empire. And I'm going to talk to you about how I learned a little bit more about that today, about why that's true. So this is very interesting. So I was like, fine, I want to find out why this Daniel's thing is censored. So I go ahead and I get into Daniel's dream. And when I read it, so I was doing YouTube videos, and the more I did YouTube videos for a long time, and I really felt like I wasn't getting, they kept talking as if I was supposed to know. I couldn't get a fix on it. I couldn't get a fix like I kind of could with Revelations. I was like, I don't know what they're all talking about. They all talked about some dream, some guy standing up, and some nations, but no one could agree on how many empires there were. And one guy made sense, like there are really just 4 empires, and basically saying there are going to be this many empires coming. Basically, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Daniel comes and says, oh, that dream actually means there are 4 empires coming, and the last empire is going to be kind of brittle. And then no one says what the end time prophecy is. I'm like, and then what? I'm like, how's that an end time prophecy? And I got so frustrated with it because I was like, none of that sounds like end time prophecies to me. I'm like, that just sounds like you're telling King Nebuchadnezzar what the future is as far as kingdoms goes. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't hear any end times. One guy finally ended it ominously by going, and then you know what happens next? The stone. And I was like, no, I've never heard about a stone. What are you talking about? I don't know about a stone. Somebody talk to me about like it. So finally I was like, I'm going to have to go read this thing, aren't I? And so I'm like, and then I was like, wait a minute, that's right. We already learned this already, that we have to read everything. Nobody tells you what's actually in the actual thing. So I go and I get it, and I'll never forget when I start to read it because my husband comes home at lunch, and I was just like, can you believe this thing? Can you believe this? I've been watching it, all this thing, and nobody said this. And I read it to him, and you're going to crack up if you've been actually watching videos on the end times or watching the ones for Daniel end times that I've been sending you, because none of them said this. This is how it begins. Daniel chapter 2, NASB. That's the only one we do is the NASB. Version, New American Standard Translation. The King's Forgotten Dream. Chapter 2. Now, in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, and I was like, okay, so he's young. It's like 2nd year, only 2nd year in. Now, in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. I'm like, I know how that goes. All right, like sleepless nights. I was like, he must have been in a bad mood. All right. Then the king gave order to call all the magicians, the conjurers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. And I'm like, okay, so he has magicians, conjurers, and sorcerers on staff? That's new to me. Do kings still do that in other nations? Like, well, I guess Trump has one pastor on, like, that he calls in a while, but is that a thing? Like, does it, and I'm just like, wow, for a time and place that we now say that none of that exists, it's interesting to me that they do this. Now, we could say, like, the Bible's not true, except I have found out about Rome. And, oh, no, honey, this stuff was happening. So then the king gave order to call in the magicians, the conjurers, the sorcerers, that's a lot, and the Chaldeans, I don't know who the Chaldeans are, to tell the kings his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. The king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to understand the dream. Okay. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. O king, live forever. I'm like, oh boy, he must be a big deal. Tell the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation. The king replied to the Chaldeans, the command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, which is like, if you do not tell me what the dream is, I'm not going to tell you the dream and then you interpret it to me. You got to tell me what I dreamed. And I'm like, what? Like, I've heard of dream interpretations because I was raised in Bible study, you know what I mean? Like, I was raised in Catholic thing, and I also saw that play, you know, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, and that he went to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh had all these dreams, and then Pharaoh would look for a guy to interpret the dreams. And I'm like, oh, this guy wants to step up. He's like, no, tell me the dream. And I'm like, wow, you really didn't get any sleep. You want the dream too? You want to know the dream? And he's like, command for me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation and you will be, okay, that's right. I started laughing at this. You will be torn limb from limb and your houses will be made a rubbish heap. And I was like, what? But if you declare the dream and its interpretation, you will see from me gifts and a reward and great honor. Therefore, declare to me the dream and its interpretation. And I was like, this doesn't sound like it's about the end times to me. I've watched so many Daniel chapter 2 videos now. No one's mentioned this. No one's mentioned a poopy king and being like, I'm going to drag thousands of magicians and sorcerers in front of me and be like, I don't want to just know the interpretation. I want to know the dream, honey. And if you don't, I'm going to tear you limb from limb. Like, I'm like, what's going on? I remember just being like, why wouldn't anyone report on this? Anyway, okay. But I'll give you big rewards if you tell me it. So they answered, so this is how they answered. They answered a second time and said, let the king tell the dream to his servants. Wow, so they ball up and they just go, let the king tell the dream to his servants, and we will declare the interpretation. The king replied, I know for certain that you are bargaining for time. Inasmuch as you have seen that the command for me is firm, that if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you. For you have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the situation is changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, that I know that you can declare to me its interpretation. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there's not a man on earth who could declare the matter for the king, inasmuch as there's not a man on earth who could declare the matter for the king. I'm like, oh my God, they're really anteing up. Inasmuch as no great king or ruler has ever asked anything, there's even an emphasis, has ever asked anything like this of any magician, conjurer, or Chaldean. Moreover, the thing which the king demands is difficult. And there is no one else who could declare it to the king except gods, who dwelling in this place is not with mortal flesh. So they're just kind of like, how dare you ask us? Which I start to get the feeling, just because I've done enough politics now, where they're like, yeah, you've been king for 1 year. It's your second year. No king would ever ask this. You're getting a little bit too out of your britches. Cool it down, dude. Like, because of this, the king became indignant and very furious and gave orders to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. Didn't quite go their way. Didn't quite go their way. And I'm just sitting there waiting there, and I'm like, we're already halfway through the chapter, and I'm like, I don't see anything about end times. I just see a king ready to kill, and I don't know what this wise men of Babylon is. And I'm like, okay, so now there are wise men in Babylon. I mean, we learned about the wise men anyway. So the decree went forth that all the wise men should be slain, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them. Oh, joy. What the heck? Then Daniel replied with discretion and discernment to Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, who had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. And he said to Arioch, the king's commander, for what reason is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch informed Daniel about the matter, and I'm sure he did, because you know what happens when a king kills all the wise men? Like all the wise men in a kingdom, all the sorcerers. When he goes and kills that entire class, do you know what's left the next time the king gets pissed? That's right, the king's guard is left. They're the next one who gets the brunt. So I'm sure the king's guard was like, oh, I'll help him out. So then Arioch informed Daniel about the matter. So Daniel went in and requested of the king that he would give him time in order that he might declare the interpretation to the king. So Daniel actually goes in. Now, Daniel is not like the sorcerers, whatever. Like the sorcerers and the Chaldeans, I guess, or whatever, the sorcerer magicians, we've learned already from our other previous studies that there's like this sorcerers, magicians, and like the Wiccans, basically, that in the view of the Bible, those are the pagan worships. The pagan worshipers are kind of like Rome. Same thing. The divination. They're all the same thing. Like they all worship Satan in a way, and then the God of the Bible. And Daniel and his friends have already stuck out as they were captured. Their kingdom, Israel, was captured. Babylon, expanded, captured Israel. And so Daniel's the wise men of his kingdom, but they don't serve the pagan gods. So they're the wise men of their kingdom, but they're different. So Daniel's a prophet, but of his kingdom. And he's saying, look, I can help you out, right? And so he says, give me a night. And Daniel went to his house and informed his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, I can't see all their names, about the matter, so that they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the house of wise men of Babylon. So basically, it sounds like he asked 3 of his friends to, please pray so that they are not destroyed with the rest of the wise men. So pretty much it sounds like Daniel's like, we're all dead. We're all dead. Can you please pray that the Lord of from the God of heaven concerning this mystery? Give me what it is. Tell me what it is. So, Verse 19, then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Okay, so anyway, then it goes on. All right, so that's what I read. Now, what I just kept laughing about this beginning thing, and it bugged me because then it goes on and gives this vision. And what he does, what is interesting to me is that he gets the idea and he goes to Nebuchadnezzar. He thanks the Lord for finding out what it is. And then he goes to the king, and the king's like, can you do this? And he's like, yes. And he goes to the king, and this is what I thought was interesting, is when he goes to the king, he says, oh, you king, king of all kingdoms. Daniel says that to Nebuchadnezzar, which I was surprised about because I'm used to all of the people in the Bible so far being like Lord of hosts or God of hosts or you are king forever. And here Daniel is saying, oh, Nebuchadnezzar, may you live forever. You know, you're king, you are this. And, you know, you're the king of everything. And I was just like, why is he says, you know, there is a God who's God of everything, but you're the king of all the kings of this earth. And I'm like, why is Daniel saying that? Why is Daniel pumping up Nebuchadnezzar just like the others pump up Nebuchadnezzar? I thought that was weird. So those things just sat in the back of my mind because I'm thinking, I thought this was the big end time prophecy, but most of it is about, and then it's about future kingdoms. And I'm like, I don't see any end times things. It's about these future kingdoms. Well, and that's what I wanted to, so that's what got me into this was being like, well, what the heck? So then he gives this thing, and I'll show you the dream very quickly, but that actually, it turns out, you may be wondering, like, why did he freak out like that? Why did King Nebuchadnezzar freak out like that? Especially considering that he really was like the king. For example, Iraq right now, Saddam Hussein completely rebuilt all of Iraq. All of those World Heritage sites you see Pompeo being asked all those questions about, are you going to hit a World Heritage site? Our military, our Marines right now, that's all they do when they're in Iraq. All they do is protect World Heritage sites and give Kathy Griffin tours of that. Saddam Hussein built 1 million palaces around these World Heritage sites, and all the World Heritage sites are all these temples and amazing things that Nebuchadnezzar and his father, like that they built all around Iraq. They built the gardens of Babylon and all these things. They built these amazing gardens, all the ziggurats, these huge, huge things. They rebuilt the Tower of Babel. They took a tower that was already there and they rebuilt around it. And in it, when Saddam Hussein rebuilt it, and all of these things, like he redid the gates of Ishtar. And what he did is he put all these bricks into it and was like, it's Saddam Hussein who did this, son of or descendant of Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar the Great, King Nebuchadnezzar the Great. Like that is what a great king he was, because there are all these things going on. If you look in the Middle East, in this whole Middle Eastern region or whatever, like we were saying the Garden of Eden came out of the Congo and then expelled, right? We look at the DNA, it was like shoved out. It looks like it literally like shoved out. There's that big Congo River, breaks into 4, and then it looks literally like the DNA was just shoved out. It spills out on the continent and then right into that Middle Eastern area right there. And that's where all civilization first begins. When you first start seeing cities start being built is right in there. And that's why they like have to force like the gardens to be built in the Euphrates and stuff like that. And why it's such a big deal that Nebuchadnezzar actually got gardens and things like that to be made and building up. And so all these different communities started to be built. I think Jericho is like the oldest city, oldest civilization they ever found, the oldest city they ever found. So you go ahead and you see, but all these kingdoms are fighting with each other. All these kingdoms and wars, there's always some guy who wants to expand and take over, and there's all these different wars. And eventually Babylon just, boom, takes them all, like just sweeps out through the region, and they're based in the Euphrates and just, boom, they just keeps expanding. And then at some point, it kind of is almost like the precursor to the Roman Empire. It just, boom, it takes out this entire Middle Eastern area based from Iraq and just sweeps out that entire, takes out Israel, goes through Egypt, takes Egypt, goes around Syria, goes around Turkey, just whoop, takes it up, right? it goes into India, the whole thing, Alexander the Great, the whole thing, they just go through. And so Nebuchadnezzar is just known as this great king. Well, all of this is happening around 600 BC. And that is why you kind of wonder why. I had to look it up when this happened, Daniel's, when his second year. This is what's very interesting, is that you wonder why Nebuchadnezzar is freaking out like this about one dream and why it's bothering him. And what I found out was, and I'll show you this. All right, you see, people seem to think when they see the Babylonian Empire, this is of 600 BC. When you look up maps like this of Babylon and you see it, they always zoom in to like just this part of the Mediterranean Sea. They're like, oh, look at how much he had, right? And you have to understand that kings don't think that way. Like, yes, they controlled, by having this much, they controlled all trade between all continents. But that's not the way kings think. Like, that's just not the way kings think. Understand that even though you can zoom into this much, this is the way that, this is what was real. All right, this is more reality. Like, this happened like this, as you can see, this is 490 BC. This is actually what was predicted in that dream that Daniel interpreted for him, is that what happens is Babylon was down here and then Persia comes in and takes him out. And that was what that's what he predicted. But that was well after Nebuchadnezzar's time. Nebuchadnezzar went on and lived out his kingdom, and it was well after Nebuchadnezzar that Persia came and took out Babylon. But this is the thing, is that Babylon's over here, and we always think, they always zoom into like right here. But in reality, there's a whole Mediterranean Sea going on, right? There's the entire, they zoom into right here, and yeah, that connects, you know, like it connects the Europe, and that connects Africa, and that connects India. But the truth is there's still like a kingdom over here. Like, this is Carthage over here. There's still Greece over here. And right now, this little itty bitty dot right there that you can see, this is 490 BC. That little dot right there, you guys, is Rome. You see, it's still a tiny little dot, is Rome at 490 BCE. Rome has not grown at all. Like, it's just that little dot. So that's the Roman Empire. It is not anywhere, that little itty bitty pink dot. But my point is that when a king, anyone, even the Persian Empire, even when they're down here, they're still thinking of the whole, all these empires as threats. Like, no one sits there as a king and just goes, I'm down here, I have my little empire. They're thinking of the world beyond. And not only that, I'll have to show you, like, the maps, they trade. Remember when we saw Jesus Christ came along and they said that the three kings from Orient? Remember how far these trading routes went along the earth at this point in time. I mean, they were trading all the way with China. This is when the silk, remember when I said they were already the silk route, about this time with Daniel is when the silk trading routes were beginning. Remember when Daniel started doing this stuff, is like when the, I think the China Silk Road had already begun. And so they were so interconnected. I'll show you a map that I found. Hold on. Okay, this map is called the Catalan Atlas. It was made in 1375. Look it up. I highly, highly recommend it. It'll freak you out. But do you know how I said that the royals hold an orb because they believed that the world was only 3 continents? The Catalan Atlas shows you those 3 continents. They hold this orb. You see, it's called the Sovereign's Orb, but as you can see, it's split into 3 parts right there. And they do that on purpose. They have it actually split into 3 parts. It's not a whole orb. And the reason they split it into 3 parts, and all the orbs are like that, all 3, no matter what orb you go to, no matter what country you go to, no matter what nation on earth that you go to, you're going to find, like this one, you'll see, like Bavaria, no matter where you go, you're going to find the orb is split into, this one might have been made later, into the number of continents that they knew were actually made at the time. That's supposed to represent the number of continents on this earth. In the Catalans, try to figure out which one this one is. I'm very curious. Queen Esther's. Interesting. So there's so many different royals today. So it looks like that could be Poland's, I wonder. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the Catalan Atlas 1375. So this is when they thought that there were just three. It's going to freak you out. So that's when they thought there were just three, and that's how they actually drew our map of all three continents. They thought it laid flat just like that. Remember how we were talking about maps? But what's interesting about this is that the trade, this is actually, this would be Russia, and that would be China going around. The trade actually went right around the north of Russia all the way around Europe, and then this was the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, trade just went all the way around the continents. This would be India down here. That's the point of India. And that would be Australia down there. So everything that was the Black Sea in here. So if you actually look up the size of continents of Russia, this is Africa down here. Very, very fascinating. So you have to understand that that's with cartography. That's the Catalan Atlas is actually very, very complicated. It's very, very colorful. It has lots of cities and lots of trade routes actually marked out. But by the time we were at 500 BC or 600 BC, where we were, those trade routes had already begun all the way out to China. That's why these, you see, by the time it's 1300, they have a ton going across Siberia and things like that, cities that have already developed and trading routes that have already developed. So anyway, my point in all of this is to say that King Nebuchadnezzar was not in his small little microcosm just thinking about his little throne and his little kingdom. He's always thinking about, when you hear them say, "Oh, king of everything," and Daniel says, "King of all the earth and of all nations," he's thinking of all nations and what threats could be out there. And it turns out that there's a reason for that. I found out what's going on. You'll notice that they don't talk a lot about when Daniel's dream actually happens at 602 BC. And I found out what else was going on at 602 BC. Okay, so let me show you what's going on. Here's King Nebuchadnezzar, right before he has this prophecy in about 602 BCE. There are some major changes going on in world politics that you guys need to know about. So what happens is, up until world politics, people had just been, we knew that civilizations were going on, but really what it was pagan societies. We talked about this. Then there'd be a slave society, a middle class society, the kind of like priestess, the upper class society, and then the rulers like the priest or whatever, stuff like that. So, and then an emperor. That's like almost every society was like that, and then they trade, the upper class people would trade. And we've kind of turned into that quite a bit. Most societies, a lot of societies kind of turned into that, right? We've kind of returned to that kind of way of life or whatever. So you'd be surprised how many monarchies and dictatorships are around today. Okay, so very few equal powers. Anyway, but what had started happening was, so King Nebuchadnezzar was used to being dictator, ruler in power, and going around conquering and bringing peoples together and ruling those people. So here is King Nebuchadnezzar. He was used to that. He had conquered everything. But remember, he's in the middle. He is right in the middle of all these continents, right in the middle, right at the very edge of the Mediterranean Sea. Well, out to the east is China. And out to the west is Greece and the Mediterranean Sea. They don't know about the New World. They don't know about any of that. So what happens is two things happen at the same time in the 100 years coming right up until Nebuchadnezzar with his dad and everything like that. Two things happen that are very, very similar. Out in the east, China starts splitting up into 148 states, which has never happened before. They've never done it where they start splitting up into states. And the same exact thing starts happening over in Greece. They start separating into like little nation states over in Greece. So right next door to him in Greece, they're doing it. And over there in China, they're doing it. But the same thing is happening there. In China, they're doing it where they set up puppet emperors in each state, 148 states, and they set up little emperors in each one, but the real people who control it are these people called the Ba, B-A. And so it's kind of this corrupt system where it's like nobody really knows who's being ruled. All this kind of corruption kind of creeps in where it's like they set up puppet emperors, kind of like that's happening right now. The Commonwealth, there's 53 countries of the Commonwealth. The Queen and the royal family are the ones in charge. They go around using charities like their United Wildlife, and they use their Tusk org. They go around ruling and giving what they want, and they give orders. But the people who take the fall are the leaders, that people that introduce the bills are their puppet leaders. They're people that are in it. For example, you can see it right now. Two people that are the Commonwealth are passing the exact same laws. Nigeria is part of the Commonwealth, and so is South America. They're both part of the Commonwealth, right? Nigeria just passed a law saying we can confiscate all your land without compensation. And South America just passed a law that says we can pass all your wealth without compensation. Well, now that Nigeria is actually doing it and all the farmers are losing it, it turns out the UK has the most investors that are stealing the most land, but they are taking one American that invested and they're using that American and they're using them in the headlines and they're using all these social justice things saying, how dare you take the land, when in reality, you dig into it more and you find out it's actually UK investors who are taking the land from the people the most. And so they're like, social justice, how could you, Nigeria, how could you give away the land when it's actually the same bill down in South Africa? But before South Africa passes it, all the headlines are saying the opposite. They're saying social justice is taking the land without compensation. So they're both Commonwealth countries. They're both passing the exact same law, but they both have puppet emperors, and they're both saying whatever it takes in each country just to get that law pushed through. Does that make sense? So they have puppet emperors in each one. Meanwhile, it's the exact same law that's coming down from the exact same place, and the exact same people are benefited in both. They still have Investec. It's Investec in the same one, and Africa just gets eaten, and people lose all their investment, right? And the people that are there lose all their land rights. So that's what was happening in China. There were like 148 states, but they had puppet emperors. The real people who had the power behind the scenes were called the Ba. Just kind of like the same thing with the royal family. They are the real people that have the power behind the scenes, but no one knows it. Same thing with the United Nations. Climate change agenda, everyone looks and says it's the Democrats. It's not the Democrats. It's the ambassadors behind the scenes. And like BASF and the royal families, they're the ones who have the power behind the scenes. The Democrats are just taking the fall. They're the ones who are the puppet masters, right? They're just the people that are puppets in place. It's not actually the Democrats. They just take the bills and put it. They barely ever come to work, right? So same thing happened now. So Nebuchadnezzar is seeing that going down. Usually kings they're the ones who have to make the decisions. Usually they're the ones that have to take the fall. You know, they have to do everything. All the responsibility is on them. And now things are starting to sing. Same thing happens over in Greece. They start doing their own little states, to the point that they hold their own Olympic Games in 776. Now, I think it's very interesting that Rome was founded in 753. Just a few years later, 753 is Rome founded, just a little bit west of Greece. And no one's really put that together yet. I'm like, doesn't anyone notice that, hey, Greece has all these little nation states, starts doing this Hellenistic society, and then they hold this big Olympic Games, and gosh, it seems like the winners, like Romulus and Remus or whatever, these people, super strength people, just happen to go over in 753, just a few years later, the amount of time it would take to get all the money together and all the wealth and all the ships, and they all land on the same year, 753, boom, in Rome, and settle it. And how hard it was to form Rome, they all talk about, right? And it takes 7 kings and 7 monarchs to get Rome going. Well, you know, Mr. Nebuchadnezzar is not stupid. He is seeing what's happening. He's like, Greece is not just sitting there. Greece is expanding. But worse than that, you know, king's always going to worry the most about the kingdom that's closest to him, is the brutality that's coming out of Rome. And I'll read to you the brutality that's coming out of Rome. Is the brutality, not only did they expand, not only did they do Olympic Games to show how strong they were to the world, did Greece say how strong we are to the world? Because what they're doing is Greece is saying, we're so strong, we're giving the power to the people. That's dangerous to a king. It's dangerous talking of saying like, oh, look, we're giving the power to the people. We really have the power, but we're giving the power to the people. What more dangerous sounding thing is there to a king than the lure of saying, oh, we're giving our power to our people, and look, you can have your own nation states and rule yourselves or whatever. That's terrifying to an emperor. That's terrifying to a dictator, right? And so, you know, he starts hearing this, then they have this Olympic game, and they say, here, you can go found Rome. And then Rome ends up being bloody as heck. And I will explain to you, give you an example. Okay, we don't even have to go over the fact that Romulus and Remus are supposed to be the ones that founded Rome. It's actually a bunch of families that founded Rome, a bunch of people that supposedly founded Rome. But Romulus and Remus can't decide who's going to go ahead and be the one who actually is going to be the king of Rome. Can't be shared. And so one slaughters the other, and it's just like the Olympic Games. That's why I'm like, can't anybody figure this one out? So one slaughters the other. Great way to start a city. But the point is that they go through these kings. The kings are brutal. They're murdered by the people. It's just one big bloody place. And news like that gets around when it's unrest, when it's like, oh, we get into the people, look at how bloody they are and what they do to each other. But I'll give you an example. One of the kings, his name is Tullus, Tulles. It's just like this new spirit gets going. Almost that, and the thing is I'm so familiar with it because it's the politics I've been watching at the United Nations. I feel like I'm reading our own histories. I'm like, this feels so familiar. Case in point, the Democrats, when they lynched black men, what did they do? The Democrats in the South, when they lynched black men in the South, and you should really look into the KKK in the South. It was actually like, I think it was something like 6 guys for 6 years or something like that. The original KKK was a lot smaller than when it was re-inflamed by Woodrow Wilson, and he brought it back for the Nazism. The actual first kit, you should really look into it. It was really small, and the country really smacked it back really fast. It was a very small contingent. But when they did take blacks and when they did hurt blacks, you heard about them drawing and quartering blacks. Like if a black man was dating a white woman or stuff. We've heard stories. They would tell us stories. I don't even know if they're true now. We'd have to look into it. But it's Hollywood and it's Nazism, and I could see them doing it just to terrify us as kids. But they talked about drawing and quartering people, putting ropes onto persons, and then having horses go in opposite directions. And it's horrific, right? It's uncivilized and horrific. And of course, they'd say that it's horrific. Then I find out that had never been done in history until the city of Rome. And this is how they write about it. It turns out the king, Tullus, Tulles, he got upset that somebody didn't keep their word during a battle. And he says, if you could have learnt to keep your word and respect treaties, I would have given you that instruction in your lifetime. But now, since your character is past cure, and he does this in front of all the troops right after a big battle, and now, since your character is past cure, do at least teach mankind. This is a guy in Rome. Like, these people are already... I showed you on the thing how small Rome is, right? I showed you on the thing how small Rome is. And this is 200 years before, 300 years before that. And they're saying, do at least teach mankind. Do at least teach mankind by your punishment to hold those things as sacred, which have been outraged by you. As yesterday your interest was divided between the Fidenates and the Romans, he was saying your loyalty was divided between Rome and the other side. And he said, just because your loyalty was divided, so now you shall give up your body to be divided and dismembered. Thereupon 2 4-horse chariots were brought up, and Medius was bound at full length to each. The horses were driven in opposite direction, carrying off parts of the body in each chariot, where the limbs had been secured by cords. All present averted their eyes from the horrible spectacle. This is the first and last instance among the Romans of a punishment so regardless of humanity. Amongst other things, which are the glory of Rome, is this, that no nation has ever been contented with milder punishments. This is the glory of Rome, that no nation has ever been contented with milder punishments. That's the glory of Rome, drawing and quartering a person for not knowing which side they wanted to be on the day before, and the guy had gone before them and said so. And confessed it, and that was what he got for confessing. And they said, this is the glory of Rome, that we have no mercy and we kill like this. That's the glory of Rome. They call lynching the glory of Rome. That when we have a soldier who thinks twice, it is the glory to draw and quarter them. It is very, very, very interesting This is what is studied under Roman law. This is ancient Rome. This is the founding of Rome. He is only, I believe, their third monarch and king, who, by the way, they have already, the first monarch, Romulus, is the one who actually founds a senate. He founds 10 senators, and that senate has now Cornelius, Cornell, Fabi, the families of Fabi, Horatio, like all these, Hermione, all those families and stuff like that. Only those families were good enough to rule and be in the Senate. Oh, the Cato Institute. You should find out what that's based on. Burning an entire nation to the ground for existing and having wealth. How dare they have wealth? After being defeated by Rome, the first Holocaust. Fantastic. This place loves blood. And you can see why that would disturb Nebuchadnezzar. Oh, no. That's not what disturbed him. It got his attention that a nation like this is happening, that a nation like this is starting to rise up, that Greece has bore Rome, who is this ruthless, and taking their men and saying, let us teach humanity for the glory of Rome, tear a human apart. For, like, before that, they'd throw a human for sacrifices in a furnace. Like, that was like the worst it got. But that was to do it for a god. This was not for a god. This was for the glory of Rome, for a nation. Let them all learn. Don't ever think twice about, like, that's just nothing but fearing a nation. That's saying this nation's coming. And you can see why maybe he'd be concerned. But it gets on, people. It gets on. And do you know when it gets on? After China splitting up into states over here in the east, and after Greece is setting up states over here in the west, and out of it all comes a couple, comes a prophet, comes a female prophet. Her name is Tanaquil, but she renames herself Gaia. You know, the religion that the United Nations studies and worships. Gaia Sazia. She's the prophet who takes a man who is a nobody. She doesn't like his birth. She takes him to the city of Rome and she says, I say if you, she divines it. She studies divination. And as she's walking through the streets, she sees an eagle place a hat on her husband's head, and she says, I see it, therefore it shall be. You will be a king of Rome. Takes him to Rome, and they lie, steal, and cheat their way to the top of the throne, to the point that when the people murder her husband, she says her husband is still alive until the man that she picked to be king next becomes king, gathers all the power, has been king for so long that by the time they figure out that her man is actually dead, it's too late. He's been king. And that eagle that she saw that day landing a hat on his head is the eagle of Rome. Tanaquil, also known as Gaia, also known as Mother Earth, the diviner, the prophet, the one who could see the future and make any man king. That's what terrified King Nebuchadnezzar, because he became king in 616 BC. Just 15 years before Nebuchadnezzar. And that's not the only thing. It's not just that she saw that he could become king. It's that he's the one that began to expand Rome. Rome was no longer a city underneath her husband. Rome began to expand. And that's when he said, if I don't have a prophet that can match her, we're done. And he just might have been right. And then Daniel gave him a prophecy that said, here are the nations coming ahead. And it turned out that Rome would not be the one that would take over Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom for another 3 generations or so. And it turned out that was right. But I find it fascinating that when you look up the eagle and Rome, no one brings it back to Tanaquil. No one brings it back to the prophetess. No one brings it back to the one that scared the poo out of King Nebuchadnezzar. And you have to dig really, really hard to find out when these people ruled. They really cover up the first 7 kings of Rome. They don't want you knowing the basis of Rome. They don't want you knowing their brutality. But I invite you to look up the book of Livy. Read it for yourself. Livy's History of Rome, Book 1. Read the brutality that they were founded upon. It's all right there. And, oh, by the way, Germany drew plenty of pictures of Tanaquil with her eagle. The sketches of her and her eagle putting a hat on her husband's head, the eagle of Rome, the eagle that they hunt down and make sure that they have with them at all time for all of their battles, because they know it'll make them king forever and ever. Just like Israel had their golden calf for Rome, it's their golden eagle. That is what they worship, because their first prophet, their Mother Earth, and their goddess is Tanaquil, Gaia, that is still worshipped today by the United Nations. It's the birth of Rome, and it's based in Greece, and nobody seems to have caught any of it. I'll show you some of the pictures. I'll show you Tanaquil. Oh, and by the way, her husband's name was Lucius. So this is the portrait that you'll find the most often. I was glad to have found it because this is Tanaquil. They weren't commoners. They were wealthy. They were elites. She just wanted to go higher in life. So this is Tanaquil and her husband. Now what you're going to notice, I want you to notice, is the eagle at the top there. That is a very, very common eagle we see all the time. I always said, what is that, a pheasant? Is that a pheasant? No, what it is it's an eagle with a hat or a robe or a scarf in its mouth. And so Tanaquil is down at the bottom, and that's her husband there looking up at the eagle. And it drops something down on his head. So I'll try and zoom in further for you to actually see that. So that because what happens is we've seen this on so many monarchs' beds now. So what happens is this is actually the eagle's head here. And then that's the scarf there. So that's actually his beak back there. So the eagle has his head back, and it's holding the sash or the head or the marker right there. So this isn't actually part of the beak and the head. That's the eagle, and that's the eagle's breast. That's his beak right there holding back. And these are the wings. And that right there is actually the hat that goes on to the king's head that she predicted she'd be a prophet. And that's why he wanted to make sure he had a good prophet, because she was making so many good prophecies and bringing them so far. You'll find some portraits here, like the British Museum has one of her here. Portraits that were made in the 1500s, like that. You'll notice she's wearing green. What I thought was interesting is that what it had here is her hand is pointing down there. She's alive, but her hand is pointing at this thing. And if you read what it is, it's a stone, and it has her name on it. And what it's implying is that she was dead in a statue, and now she's come alive for some reason. Her statue has come alive. A statue that was in her name has now come alive. Which is a little creepy, considering that she was, a big Wiccan, big diviner or whatever. They said that men were big diviners, but I actually haven't heard a lot about, I guess the Bible says that men were huge into divination, right? That's actually true. Oh crap, we're at 54. So, but if you look up Tanaquil, Tanaquil, you'll see it says Etruscan prophet. They'll tell you. Britannica, they talk about it all the time. They call her a trailblazer. They say she married a lowborn Lucumo. That's not true. He was actually pretty high up in social status. She just didn't want, she wished they were in Rome where the kings could be. And so the fact of the matter is that Etruscan meant that they was actually local. He was from local instead of like not from, it's this whole 9 yards or whatever. They're so always racist. Anyway, so you'll find coins like this of her like that. But what I find interesting is like the German sketches. Hold on, I'll find it. OMG, it took me like 20 minutes to find. I'm exhausted. I'm like, shoot. It's not supposed to take that long. It took me forever. I did all the research on my phone. Dang it, that I'm taping on. All right, this is an amazing, but this is a 1700, in the 1700s Germany, impressionist Germany. This is a sketch. Do you see that eagle and the hat up there? This is Tanaquil and Lucius on the throne of Rome. This is this is how big of a worship. This artist, his name is, you should look him up. His name is Jacob Gottlieb Thalot. He did a ton of things for the Prussian Empire. A ton of things for the Prussian-German Empire, for the Holy Roman Empire in the 1700s. And remember, the 1700s is when America finally breaks away. And remember, the Prussians actually come in and send their troops. The Pope and the Prussians send in their troop to fight America and make sure the independence doesn't happen. But all these cards start being drawn up, and it's very interesting that these are the figures that they start drawing as they start building up the empire that eventually becomes World War I and World War II. And I kind of consider the First World War to be the one with America when the American Revolution happens. And it's interesting because like Sweden starts to break away and they bash down Sweden first. A number of other states start to break away and they start bashing them down right away. It's very interesting to see all the revolutions that start to happen and the kings who start to give their people freedoms, and the Pope is like, what do you think you're doing? And they smash down those monarchies, or they switch out the monarchies with others. It's very with other people that don't feel the same way, and they restore the rights all back to the monarchy and take them away from Parliament. It's very interesting to see what's going on. And all through that, Germany is having this guy, Jacob Gottlieb Thalot, draw these things of Rome and the foundations of Rome. And one of the first sketches, number 23 or 24, which number is this? This is number 23, yeah, is just of Tanaquil. Just of Tanaquil, the prophet Tanaquil. And so they do this big thing, and it's one of the most honored pictures of her. And you'll see they surround her in this huge, big wreath, right, of Tanaquil around here, this huge thing of her sitting with her husband on the throne. And the thing is, she ushers in the next leader of Rome. And remember, he was the very first monarch of Rome who was not elected. And she did that on her own by making sure that this guy, when he was killed, pretended, she kept acting as though he was giving her orders and that he just had a head wound. He was actually killed in the head by an axe. It's very interesting. It turns out the double-sided axe is supposed to be a moon thing that's tied into Gaia and her prophecies, things like that. It's very interesting. This, I forget the name of it. There's a name for it, but you can look into it when you look into her name. So anyway, but this eagle that you see up there, that's an eagle up there from her prophecy that she was supposed to have seen. And that's the point, is that in the 1700s, when the Prussian Empire is really building up the Holy Roman Empire, they are enshrining this moment in ancient Roman history of the eagle. And you see that circle right there. That is the circle wreath. That's the whole point. We keep seeing this Roman circle, the circle of the king who is supposed to be monarch, who is supposed to be king. It's important to note that Rome was founded on a monarchy, and that the first Roman monarch, Romulus, he established a senate. He established a senate. You see in ancient Rome, they had a half circle, just like you see in the EU, they have a half circle. And he established a senate, but that senate had families, and those families, they're known as the patricians. And those 10 families, they kind of like whoever are in those patrician families, whoever inherits that ends up going on. You have to have that DNA to kind of be elected and be in it. Same thing in Rome right now. Same thing with the deep state right now. You kind of have to have that heritage to be elected and be in that, to be in the throne room, if that makes sense, to be making the powerful decisions. Whereas the whole American Revolution was, we are the ones who have to live on our land. We're the ones who have to manage our lands. We're the one who knows what it's like to live underneath these laws. Therefore, we're the best ones to be making the decisions about these laws. And they've really gotten into our heads and turned our minds around about that and been like, no, you actually don't know what's best for you. And I thought it was interesting in one of the studies that I saw, I can't remember which end time prophecy in it, because just after I got through all of this, last night as I was going to bed, I was exhausted, and one of my friends was like, well, now you should check out Isaiah end time. And I was like, what? Now I'm honestly starting to wonder, because I do know from growing up that Isaiah is like earlier on in the Bible. And I'm just like, what does every Bible like book have something about the end times? And then that starts scaring me about like, well, then that starts making me think like end times are real or something. Like that starts crossing over. Every once in a while it starts hitting me that like maybe this stuff is real. Like I know I'm studying history and I'm like, this is real. And I see eagles all around me and I see Prince Harry wearing a Nazi symbol. Like I know the royal family's with the Nazis. Every once in a while it kind of creeps into my house that this is all real. I want it to be all nice fairy dust and be looking at my nice, like, I don't know, maybe my pain keeps me dissociated enough or whatever that I'm kind of like, oh, this isn't all actually happening, but I guess we'd rather know. I don't know. But I'm tired. Anyway, so I thought you guys should know, like, anyway, what I found in this week's dig, and we are officially at over an hour, and I'm exhausted. It took me forever to find that photo, so I'm going to tell you what this is again, since clearly they don't want you to find the freaking photo. I finally found it just by typing in Tanaquil German. Tanaquil German, and then it was like pop, and I'm like, you gotta be joking me. So if I look up Germany and Tanaquil, then they'll tell me who it is. And how do they describe her? Oh, great, it's all in German. So it has a whole bunch of things about Tanaquil being in German. It says, I'm pretty sure it says the prophet Tanaquil. And that's my point, is that both sides have prophets, and we should be aware of that. To the point where King Nebuchadnezzar was freaking out that he wouldn't have a kingdom, and Daniel came along and was like, no, your kingdom's going to last, and eventually it will fall to this kingdom, and we find out that it did, as we saw on that map. It fell to Persia, and then it'll fall to whatever, though people keep saying, like, oh, it fell to the Greeks, and then it fell to the Romans, and I'm like, really? Because from where I'm standing, the Greeks and the Romans are no different. Maybe I'm wrong. I really don't know. Sometimes I get into things, but everyone just seems to assume that what we've been told is real. Everyone seems to assume that, oh, if the history books tell you, if the kings told you it happened this way, then it must have happened this way. They all just assume that, like, they never assume a king has a bad intent. They never assume a king has ever lied. And to that end, I guess I'm going to end on this. We all lie. Did everyone forget that we all wanted to lie to our parents? We always wanted to lie when we grew up, and what we had to do is we had to like get my entire childhood was learning not to lie. That was my whole childhood. That is the natural instinct, is to lie. My natural instinct is to lie, always to lie. And I realized that my growing up, and honestly, my husband and I were talking about this last night. He came home last night, and I just was like, it's brave to not lie. Being boss, like the people that I know, I'm realizing one of the common things that factors amongst all of us, there's a bunch of us, some of us are like, there's all different types of where we are in our lives and how successful I guess I should say how happy we are, how satisfied we are with our lives, how much we've conquered, how much of our own fears we've conquered, how much we have of what we want in life, how much we've gotten of what we want, how many of us have reached our dreams. A lot of us turns out our dreams weren't what we thought they were. We found out who we really are, and then we got more dreams, and our dreams have changed and expanded or whatever. And so our satisfaction has increased, or it's changed or we're more excited. Some people have gotten into new things and they're like, I feel like I have a whole second career, and they thought they were one thing and then they did this other thing. They're like, I've never been happier. I'm doing something totally different. But the people who are more satisfied, like, in order to confront their past, it requires a sort of honesty. That's a lot of what AA is about. A lot of addiction is about just being really honest. Sometimes I feel like that's what Mike Bayer does on Dr. Phil. He's like, let's be honest, it's a choice. That's all of life is like, balling up and becoming honest and learning when to be honest and when not to be honest. And I said, even when you lie, when you finally become an honest person, there's being an honest person, being an idiot about being honest. There are times when you have to lie, but it's a choice. You're not lying out of fear. Let me give you a good example. My channel is Book of Katherine. I don't give you my name, number, and social security number. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not like, here's all my info. That's like omitting, part of, that's out of protection and being smart. Like, that's it. And people will be like, oh, well, that's not really, you're right. It's not really, but that's the kind of things that people ball up and make. And when they change information about themselves or whatever, it's being done with the knowledge of like, it's for this, it's to protect myself and it's protect others. It's for the good. And it's like, you know what I mean? There are some things that we do for healthy, protecting boundaries in this healthy way. And you learn, but you're able to do it without lying. And not only that, but I'm not even lying about it. Everyone knows. Like, I'm open with it. Everyone knows. Like, obviously, my first name isn't Book. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's honesty in that. And so there's this big difference between, being honest and then lying out of fear, just feeling like you have to and run and escape, versus the more courageous you get about telling the truth and knowing that you don't have to say everything all the time. One of the scariest things is when people ask you questions and you've learned that one of the hardest things about being honest is when you've learned that, well, I'm not going to lie. Lying always gets me in trouble. So that means I'm going to have to just not say anything. And they know I'm not saying anything. They know I'm not answering the question. And being okay with that boundary. That's what boss people do. They know how to handle that situation. And just, I have to do it with students sometimes. Sometimes students in today's culture will ask me questions that are beyond, like, the things that they don't need to be asking me or something like that. Like, sometimes they'll be like, so where exactly is your house? Like, they'll actually say that today. And I've learned to just be like, well, it's just, I'm so lucky that the drive isn't that far. Or just be like, well, it's a really nice thing on my bed. It's not what it used to be. Or just be like, man, well, and where I used to live, it was 4 hours and it ain't that. And they're like, oh, huh, but it's not, I didn't answer it. I didn't tell them where it was. And I put down that boundary. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not just going to tell someone I've never met, like, exactly where my house is. Does that make sense? That's not smart. And it's not good for them either. That's not good for them either. That doesn't do them any favors. Does that make sense? So, it's hard learning to be that strong and to be that honest and to be okay with putting down boundaries and just, anyway, I don't know how I got into that. That's what happens when it takes me 20 minutes. So go ahead, Jacob Gottlieb Thalot, since it took me that long, number 23. And it's interesting to look at all of his drawings. He's got some little drawings, like there's something from Voldemort, like the head on the back, like a face coming out of the back of the head. And I'm just like, oh, really? That didn't come from Harry Potter? There's just some face in somebody's back of the head and stuff. And it's like, calls it perseverance or something like that. I'm like, oh, okay. Ain't nothing new under the sun, I guess. All right. So I'm going to go, since I'm really worn and I'm in a lot of pain, and I had to tape this because, can you imagine me trying to tweet this? I almost tweeted out all this research this morning, and I was like, I can't do that. I cannot do that. I do not have the ability to dump all of that in you. And it took an hour to do that talking. Can you imagine me trying to do that? And I realized this morning as I was putting on lipstick, I was like, I think what I do sometimes is I'm really just a research student at home. And then every once in a while, I dump a research paper on you. I'm like, I don't know what university is making a lot of money off of me right now, but I probably, this is what graduate students do or something like that. I don't know. I'm like, oh, when I get out of pain, what am I going to do with myself? So I was like, it's going to be a whole new world, whole new world, because I've gained all these new skills. That's what happens in life. That's why I love Do What You Are, because it says when you change jobs or when you get new jobs, you like Dr. Peterson makes it sound like you're born one way and then that's who you are and then that's it. And I'm like, no, Do What You Are matches to me a lot more of what life is like. You get a job and it develops these skills in you out of necessity. We change so much. You change so much as a human. Like I've had how many seasons in my life? Everyone I know has changed dramatically through life. And each job you gain skills or you lose or just these skills drop away or whatever. And it changes you and molds you and you grow these skills in your life. I know all of my friends, and then it grows you as a person and makes you more able for more opportunities in the future, or it changes like this other friend I said, they took a risk and did something very, very different and they love it nothing like that what they did before and they are very, very, very happy. And I think if you think that you're just going to be the same way all the time, and that never changes, then you never go for anything different. You'd be amazed. I think that's the story of humanity, is that humans are absolutely insanely. Go to the World's Fair in New York, in Queens, New York, and find out what humans are capable of doing. Queens, New York really took into account what humans have done for thousands of years and then try to one-up it. And you end up seeing what humans have been capable of doing for thousands of years. And you're just like, we've done some insane things. Humans are very, very capable of doing incredible things. So hopefully you choose not to draw and quarter someone to show mankind any kind of glory. Anyway, that's what people are like, oh, I want to be a millionaire. And I'm just like, really? Do you want to be King Nebuchadnezzar, stressing about what kingdom's coming for you next? Because that's what my friends go through. They have to worry about what's going to be the next threat constantly. And like constantly there is some, people, I know that like as a teacher, I didn't have to worry at all about my job ever. Like I was just like, well, which district, no matter where we went, I had a job. If I wanted to stick with teaching, no matter where we went, there was a job. There's some wonder about that. You know what I mean? About always getting off at 3 p.m. every day, and having a summer off and never having to worry about, oh, my entire livelihood depends upon, being better than whoever just came out, last week. There is some stress to that, and same in every creative industry. So anyway. All right, same with nursing and stuff like that. You will always have a job. There is some amazing... That's why I said it would be nice to do the farming thing, because I'm just like, you're always needed, always wanted, always going to be safe, always going to be warm. And that job's not going away. It's not dependent upon you outdoing yourself every 3 months. There's a huge relief to that. Anyway, I can tell I'm tired. All right, please donate down below, because that was a lot of research. That's just so many hours. I can't even begin to tell you how many hours of research that took. I can't even begin. So please, if you could, find more about the eagle. Keep digging into it, because that eagle, by the way, like the eagle of Rome, it has a name. It's like it's the Aquila. The Roman eagle has a name. You should see the way that they treat it. It's called the Aquila, Aquila, the Roman Aquila. The way they treat that thing, they worship it like a little. If they lose it in a forest, the Romans would just hunt down that little. It would become a pin and it would become a badge, and they would just hunt it down in a forest forever if they ever lost the badge. And soldiers would be killed if they lost their little badge of an eagle. Like, oh, you lost your gold eagle badge. Off with your head or whatever and stuff like that. That's how much they worship that eagle. And it's been worshipped that long. And you can see, like, when the Prussian Empire was bringing it back up again, that's why this Gottlieb guy drew, this is the eagle, there it is, with the crown, with the circle. And when we see it again in these rooms of kings in England and things, and we see this big eagle, and then it's sitting over this big golden crown of a monarch, of the Roman emperor, it goes all the way back to a prophet saying, you know, the eagle was the one who chose. The eagle was the one who chose who was going to be king, even though they weren't of royal birth or whatever, all the way down to a prophet who said it. And she renamed herself Gaia. She renamed herself that and did powerful things. And it really does sound like she just ran the whole thing. And it's not surprising that as the religion of Gaia has come back into play, that women have come back into power. It's become such a powerful thing. All women have becoming into all the positions and ruling men from behind the scenes. That's exactly what happened. And also, by the way, if you study their marriage, this Kia and Tanaquil and Lucius, if you study their marriage, she was all into wedding design, went all into the marriage ceremony, she was known as the source. Had all this, she had pictures of her with her sewing needles and threading needles, very much like Queen Victoria. It scared me because as I read about their relationship, it was like reading about Victoria and Albert. It was as if Victoria and Albert were like a rebirth of Tanaquil and Lucius. Very, very similar. And Lucius was supposed to be like a commoner brought up for them, you know, for the royals. It was almost the exact same thing. She was of noble birth and he was not so much. She brought him up. It's the exact same thing going on with Victoria and Albert. And so there's this whole symmetry going on, and they gave birth to this huge empire just like he gave birth. And remember, like, that was the king where they started expanding out, and and you should see how they expanded out too when you read Livy and read into how Lucius did. They do not bring up this stuff easily. You really have to dig. They do not tell you about the first 7 kings, the first 7 monarchs of Rome at all. They don't want you knowing about that stuff. It's hard to even find out who the kings were. But this guy, Lucius, like the stuff that he did, like the way he tricks it into, he says like, oh, I'll take care of your kids. And then he sends the kids off on vacation. Then while the kids are off on vacation, he starts wooing the people and says, I'll be king. So he's not even heir to the throne. And he just sends the kids. It's all these like awful Roman tactics that feel like the Catholic Church. It feels like the beginnings of the Catholic Church, of this like Richelieu type of politics of, you go on to, I thank you, Kitty. He was made to be their caretaker. So the king, he got in good with the king. He was the caretaker of the kids. And then he went ahead and when the king passed on or whatever, he was like, you guys go on vacation. Good. You know, king passed on, go on vacation. He sent him on this big vacation. He said, I'll take care of the kingdom for you. And while they were gone, he set up like 100 new set-up seats, bought them all, got them all into their own, like, you know, now you're mine or whatever, just like the lady did at that prison camp thing. It was like, here's $1,000 chip. Here, I'm going to give you all $1,000. I was like, she pretty much just bribed them on international stage and was like, you come to me and I'll give you your jobs and you work for me. And I'm like, you pretty much, now we know there's a bunch of bouncers that are going to work for her and be her strongmen from prison. Thanks a lot. And why, can we talk about why everyone from prison in Arizona, Nevada was African American? Can we ask why that was? And one white lady? What the heck? Because Arizona, Nevada does not have a black population. Like, what is circulating through? Like, why? How is that? What are they moving people around into prison system? Just like, here, help me get arrested or whatever. That's not the population in Nevada. Like, that's not the population at all. The entire Nevada is just completely like Hispanic and white, and that's it. Like, that's there is no African-American population in Nevada. So why were all the prisoners black? I'm like, what is going on? I swear there's like this little itty-bitty, there's a small, little, tiny street where you can find a black population if you want to. But almost everyone I know in Las Vegas that's black is wealthy the house. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, that's on a totally separate subject. But it's not Book of Catherine if I don't hit 1 million subjects. I better go. I love you. Donate down below. Please donate down below. And I will talk to you later. Mwah. You got to a minute 20. Did I break a record? I just might have broken record. Nice. Au revoir. Bye. And somebody send this to Victor Davis Hanson, because he is big up on this stuff. He might be the only guy that actually, that I know of, that knows this stuff. I need to find more professors need to get online with their stuff, who are into these sorts of things. They need to, I think more professors need to get online, because people, we need their digging. We need their digging. We need to start sharing the wealth, because they're not putting it out there for us. All right. Love you guys. Bye.